Mm, mm. Good morning. It is sunrise right now as I'm recording this. And I have been thinking a lot about my journey, learning about boundaries and finding my relationship with the performing arts as sort of personal historical integration of my life and figuring out how either boundaries that were present, that were respected or blown over on my end or others' end, or boundaries that weren't there because there was a lack of awareness or knowledge, really impacted my relational availability with being a performing artist, with coming into collaborative or co-creative experiences. I'm looking into these days a lot of times in my own personal sort of research and exploration, what I do, how I do, all of those things around intimacy practices and how so much requires a degree of vulnerability that I think we very frequently, not always, right? And there are certainly performing artists that do practice tools in this way, especially intimacy directors or coordinators. Yet that's oftentimes reserved for scenes that have some sort of sexuality to it. And I'm finding the necessity for myself, and maybe this is being a highly sensitive person, and perhaps you identify in that kind of way too, whether your sensitivities are from being an HSP or being neurodivergent or having a history of trauma. There's a lot of us that have high sensitivity, and we are also trained to have high sensitivity as artists and to be really responsive and then deal with potentially traumatic content in the way in which we tell our stories and the characters in which we allow to either move through our body if we're channeling character or step into if or imagine ourselves to be if we're doing more of like a cognitive approach or whatnot. But those are different approaches that I think we can take that also require boundaries, coming back to boundaries. So there are boundaries and intimacy. And I think the thing is, for me, what I'm finding is boundaries, there's boundaries and then there's boundaries with intimacy. In the way I'm currently framing things. And this isn't going to be how everybody needs or wants to think about stuff. And so feel free to fold what helps where you're at into your practice and to ask me clarifying questions if something comes up that you're curious about, or if your body has a big no to something. I invite you to get curious around if that's coming from like your core authentic self that's like no, or if it's like a protective mechanism or shell that's like, I can't let that in because that would mean something I'm not prepared for if I did. And you still may choose and it still be aligned with your essence underneath that and so therefore it's a no for right now because I can't handle that. Or it could be and there's something that feels right and I'm going to sit with that feeling and also experience the paradox of the pushback and the no on this side, but not force the connection. And I think the forcing a connection is something many of us, I know I certainly have been trained to do as an artist, as a performer. Sometimes our body, our mind, our psyche, our rehearsal process doesn't feel ready. And we have to, or choose to, or performance culture says we, or just the structure of how things are laid out requires that we move forward anyway. Not that for a body, for a system, for a sensitive soul, that can feel a lot of, one can feel a lot of different things in different ways. And the nervous system's interpretation of that can potentially be more severe or harder, I think, than we are accustomed to be honest about. And so I'm finding that the more I just let myself be honest, the more I really want to just express how painful that practice is. Whether you choose to continue in that kind of practice or choose to meet that realization in ways that might, for me or for you individually, our bodies might register that as completely unsafe and not okay. I'm currently in the latter phase right now. I don't know if it's a phase or if it's just going to be a new rooting into my experience, but I had a practice the other day with a group of humans that ride the space between movement and spirituality and intimacy and sisterhood. And we began practicing in a very like intuitive, embodied flow state kind of way because we all have our own practices. Yet as there was a wave to sort of feel like it was cresting and pushing out into deeper waters of practice and exploration, we checked in with our bodies to see what was going on. And there was, from one of the bodies, an experience that they were unsure about what her heart felt ready, and down in her belly, down in her womb space, there was a prickly sensation, and it was just prickly. And so we sat with that because that the prickliness is a body signal that's communicating something. So as someone, for me, who really values boundaries and really values a full body yes, whether that's a full experience of a yes in my body, or a full experience of a yes in the body and bodies in the bodies I'm working with, and as a body of collective practice, we sat with that. And what came up was this really big emotional upwelling of not feeling ready and for the possibility of leading or guiding, because there was an opening for it to be, well, we all have our practices and we can take turns leading and guiding if that feels right. And there was an experience of not wanting to be the first, not wanting to go first. And that's a beautiful thing, right? And the prickliness, the thing for me is that, we don't know what the prickliness is sometimes unless we really investigate it. And we found out that there was a willingness, a desire to move forward, and just a very clear boundary. And I don't want to go first. And that's such a valuable thing to know for the group and also for the person having the experience. The sun's coming in now. I may at some point shift the curtains a bit. But all that said, I wanted to do a little bit of practice today, maybe about finding our own sense of readiness or honesty about lack of readiness regarding whatever's alive for you. I think when I'm talking about this, maybe you've had ideas or images or memories or patterns or possibilities in the future crop up, and either relating to your own readiness or lack of readiness, or relating to another person or body's readiness or lack of readiness. And that can happen creatively, professionally, but also oftentimes there's some crossover into other areas of our life. I had been having these flashbacks of a time when I was a really little girl, leading, guiding an experience of play, playfulness, and how that didn't go the way I thought it was going and the way I felt it was going, and that I misread somebody's cues. And they had a really emotional experience. And what happened was a parent came and sort of carted them away. And then we were expected to keep playing, but I didn't want to play because I didn't know what had happened, if I had done something to trigger it, if it was really clear that something about the way in which I was guiding the play did trigger it. And I have my suspicions in hindsight of how the sort of like imaginary landscape of child's play can be something that I was like assigning little archetypal patterns to people and the roles we were going to each play, and then playing out storytelling, sort of like theater in a way. And I think that the archetype or story that the person I saw possibilities of one particular kind of archetype in, I think the naming or the labeling or the experience of either being seen as that or feeling maybe even closer to that than I had thought or realized. And sort of like I thought it was like a fun villain monster sort of experience, like that could be fun to play. But there seemed to be something that hit and triggered in a way that created a spontaneous, just really big emotional reaction. And in hindsight, now that I've been through what I've just been through, what I need and what I think that the body that's triggered also can value, because I've moved through this experience the other night with this group of women, is that, that's where real intimacy comes from. That's, to me, that's how we establish safety for the game, that the game stops and we assess. Is there something that happened that needs to not happen again? Is there an awareness that needs to be brought forward that can change or shift the way we move forward so that more people feel comfortable? And I'm curious what arises for you in your body when I say that. I'd love for us to journal a little bit about that, maybe for 3 minutes. Just whatever comes up for you. Maybe there's memories or thoughts or perspectives or plans or needs or desires that kind of float up. And I just want to take a moment for that. So we'll do a moment of checking in and tuning with the body, and then we'll journal. So just go ahead and place your hand on your heart and maybe one on your belly or your womb space if you have a womb, or if you don't and you feel connected to the energy of womb, your hand where that would be. So one hand is on the heart center, the bridge between the top half of the body and the lower half of the body. The part of the body that is more private and lives more in darkness below, and the other part that is invited into or witnesses more sociability and connection to interrelationship out in the world and society through the voice and the sight and the ears. And the belly being where we digest quietly, the womb being where we gestate in the dark. And that gestation in the dark space is what I want to invite to express, or for you to commune with as you journal. As you journal, I'm going to close the blinds, but go ahead and take 3 minutes. Go. Okay. Go ahead and be with that a moment. And I invite you to check in with your body, do a little body scan, and just notice if there's any areas or an area that's standing out in your mind. And I invite you to rub your hands together and place your hands upon that area. And if it's your hands, you can place your hands on your hands. Mine is my throat. I have a lot there, things I'm afraid to speak, but yours might be your heart and grief, or your solar plexus and fear or anger. It could be your head and confusion and overwhelm. Those are some common things, but it could be any area of your body and any feeling or sensation. And depending on your relationship with your body, you may or may not feel comfortable really going inwards and being with the sensations as the sensations, and that's okay. And if so, just lightly bring awareness to the area and let it know you're there, that there's some sort of safe connection point. I invite you to allow your hands to shift to different areas that might also need attention, or stay where they're at if it's really feeling like it's meeting a need. We're going to go ahead and explore this durationally now, just hands on body for 3 minutes. And if something happens where you feel anxious or shaky, you can discharge the energy just by shaking or brushing, okay? Or being tender. Any of those tools, go ahead and just explore. Feeling into the sensations. And being aware with how safe you feel with your eyes closed and gaze in and down versus eyes open and maybe still energetically in and down. Or if you feel more alert and open and out, and if that feels safer to you, that's a cue that there's some sort of alert readiness to engage, which doesn't have to be, but it might indicate a scanning for threats, the scanning for danger, lack of safety, a hyper vigilance when our nervous system doesn't have a relationship with an environment or a life or a place in relationship with the world where we feel like we can really let our guard down. So if that's you, a lot of performing artists do have that, especially the over-functioning perfectionist varietal, which I love and is beautiful in its own way to keep you safe and to keep the project or the projects moving forward. And it's important the nervous system learns how to unhook and experience moments of rest and digest, of being really available to that sort of safety, registered somatic safety. And perhaps you're still in connection and communion with your body, or perhaps this experience helps you feel inspiration to move. And if so, I want to invite that to be a transitional space for us for maybe about these last 30 seconds. of our 3 minutes. And settling into one spot. Maybe you've already been in the same spot, or maybe you've been moving around, but I'm just going to invite you to take a deep breath in. And if you'd like, you can incorporate your arm stretch and then exhale, release any tension. Maybe toss that tension down into the earth. Again, deep inhale up. Full deep breath. Nice stretch. Arms overhead and drop. Again, maybe you're standing, maybe you're sitting. If you're laying, you can raise them up in front of you and drop them down. One more. Deep full inhale. Release. And then tuning back in to the heart and the belly or the womb space. Noticing if your eyes feel like they want to close or stay open, either with a soft gaze or with an alert awareness. And whatever feels like it's connected to increased resourcing, meaning you have more access to safety, more access to stability, more access to nourishment in your own felt sense of yourself. I want you to invite more of that and drink that in as your form of a self-care, to be resourced as self-care. So self-care not as an escape from our experience from a activated nervous system space of needing to retreat from the lack of safety. You feel that one? I feel that one. But anywhere where there's vestiges of that, allowing that to be there and maybe being aware of the lack of readiness to feel safe. But also allowing that same process of just gently unhooking anything that's gripping that story or those somatic sensations, and seeing if you can find release. Okay, I think that's going to be us for today. I invite you to stand up, stretch your body, lay down, rest your soul, go out, be with nature, walk your path, or connect in any way that feels like the next best step. And see where your needs might lead you if you lead yourself from connection to your needs for somatic safety and inner understanding and relational intimacy. Okay, till next time.